Greetings YouTube, performance reviews, where I give you the review from the technician's point of view. Today we're going to talk about my personal vacuum. Now, I have tested just about everything over the years, and central vacuums are pretty much the end-all and be-all to vacuum cleaners, as I've explained to a lot of people. So what is my personal vacuum setup? Well, it's custom. It's 1200 AirWatts. It's in an old MD vintage Silent Master body, and well, it's pretty darn powerful. So let's go ahead and I'll show you the build process, and then I'll go through and test the suction, and I'll show you what it sounds like on my wall and what it looks like. Stay tuned. Sometimes I get a crazy idea, and well, here is one of them. So you'll notice the circuit board here supports 2 motors. Probably need a heavier lead into the board though. What I've got here are backpack motor brackets, which then I have drilled so that they fit this MD. You see we got 2 motors, and we're going to attach them inside this machine and see how much sucky suck we get. These protein backpack brackets, super cool. So now we can put in this motor versus the original, I don't know, motor from the 1990s that was in there. So it was a lot more high tech. I was not satisfied with 650 AirWatts in this motor. I retrofitted in the Silent Master, which was far more power than it had from the factory. So I decided to add a second motor, which meant drilling a hole with a hole saw, getting a second motor, and going to Home Depot and getting the proper hardware to mount the second hardware, which cost me about $3. Plus, then the cord now needs to be upgraded to a 30 amp, and I also happen to have a 30 amp PCB already in here, came with the unit. That's kind of cool. That's kind of what gave me the idea. Well, I didn't buy locking hardware for this, so we just use a little bit of Loctite on there before we put the motor in. So I always put the little gasket in, and then when we gotta do the big gaskets, we'll actually seal it. We go right there.
I'm just going to show you a quick time lapse of me assembling this and put a little bit of music in here. This is probably about a 45-minute process, dubbed down to about a minute.
And you can see the bottom of the motors. You can see where the holes are cut out for the motors. We're going to test this 1 of 3 places, and then we're going to talk about the numbers. The first is directly at the unit, the second is at a valve in my house, and the third is at the end of the hose. 90 to 95 inches of working vacuum is no slouch, and as you can see, I get a little over 100 sealed. Again, we're at an altitude of almost 8,000 feet where I'm at, so this is really good. Now, it does appear to be some sort of relief valve in this. The way that this works and the way that I've been testing this, just messing around with it off camera. We're going to go ahead and test it at this valve here. As I've explained in other videos, these valves seal up way better than the utility valve on the unit. So let's see what the numbers are here. 90 inches of working vacuum is no slouch. Now it's getting about 55 to 60 inches depending on how we bend this hose, and a little bit, about 105 inches sealed. So not as high as numbers as you would expect for adding the additional power. And that, again, is a problem with hose technology, is nobody really has a hose that's unrestrictive enough. So we've passed the power threshold for the hose. So if we have this unsolicited at 2 inches, maybe we get some better numbers. But really, again, we've passed the power threshold for 1.25 inches.
Just for fun, let's see what happens when we have 2 valves open and what those numbers look like.
So those are the numbers with the hose extended, meaning 2 valves are open. Again, excellent. All right, what does 1200 AirWatts sound like? Well, the unit's in my garage, and now we're in one of the more carpeted spots in the house. Now, if you're listening to that, you might hear the HVAC in the background, which is pretty loud because we're right above the mechanical room in the house. But yeah, that's pretty darn quiet. We have switched to the studio microphone. You're going to hear the real sound of this thing running. Again, the camera, it's about 2 or 3 meters away from the unit to give you an idea. And let's go ahead and turn it on. Now you can hear both motors going on and off, and you do hear like a high-pitched noise. I'm not exactly sure what is causing that, but there's some sort of air turbulence issue, presumably inside the can. So it's not overly loud. It's definitely quieter than like a Dyson or something, but it is kind of loud for a central vacuum. And again, I chose these motors because of their specs and nothing else. All right, now the moment of truth. I've been running this for about a month, and I need to see if anything is melted or damaged from this motor configuration. So we're going to take a look real quick and just see how everything is. Okay, there were a couple questions I had, whether or not these mounts were getting too hot. Nope, these are good, heat resistant. Everything looks good. The circuit board, you probably can't see it on camera, but I can see it where I'm standing. The circuit board has no heat marks. Nothing looks like it got too hot in there, which is excellent. I was really worried about that because, again, we do have 2 motors in here, and this is not a configuration that's sold. MD will do some custom work for you if you ask, but this is just not one of those. Upon opening it, it is safe to do as of right now. Again, I do have that 30 amp cord. One of my last videos, people were arguing with me what voltage this was. This is 120 volts. This is a 30 amp 120 volt plug. It's highly unusual. It is used in like air conditioners and stuff, but not so common these days. So yeah, yes, this probably should be 220, but we made it 110 volts. So understand that this was natively a 120 volt machine and is only drawing 120 volts, but 30 amps. And that is something that is available. Put the plug specification, which is again, exclusively only 120 volts used. All right, here's the real question is why doesn't MD make one of these right now? Well, I will see if I can custom order this sort of unit, but I suspect the heat. The heat from this setup is really hot, which is why I opened it up and checked it, because it gets too hot to touch. This bottom section here, yeah, you can't touch that with your hand. It just gets too hot. Again, nothing is melting in there, so it seems all right. I do have concerns about the longevity of these motors, especially with the bearing setup. I suspect that the bearing grease will heat up too much and be out of spec. I could be wrong, there could be high heat bearing grease in there. So we'll have to find out. Again, the price of the motors, I don't really care. I own a vacuum company. I can get these things at wholesale cost, and I have new units sitting in a warehouse, so I really don't care if this breaks because I'm not your typical end user. I am an installer. With that in mind, this is my 1200 AirWatt MD Silent Master. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you really like what we're doing, check out our Patreon. Our Patreon supporters are going to be like, finally the video on this, because you guys were teased with every single detail about this for a few months now. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a great day.